The world is a scary place. We can't seem to go in an entire week without a significant shooting, or even without a country having to deal with another terrorist attack. Heck, in the current climate, it wouldn't be surprising for a super virus to break out, and for the world to reenact scenes from The Walking Dead. And if that happens, you need to have a plan. My plan? Make my way to Canada, of course. Or maybe that plan is for dealing with the upcoming election. It's hard to keep track of all the emergency plans after a while. So much can go wrong. Brought to you by the folks over at Rocket Cat Games, Death Road to Canada is a top-down action game with roguelike and strategy elements. It came out on July 22nd, 2016 on Steam and the Humble Bundle store for $14.99, with a 10% launch discount on both services. I played about 8 hours of the game to make these first impressions, playing several of the different variants available. The question is, will these gameplay mechanics be friendly enough to both veterans and newbies of the roguelike action genre? Or are the undead the least of your worries, as you have to worry more about the game bringing your enjoyment to a sudden, abrupt end? That's what me and my critical eye will find out. But before I begin, this key was obtained from the developer for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? So your goal in Death Road to Canada is spoiled by its own title. There are rumors that the hockey-loving neighbors to America's north are somehow free of the undead menace that has taken over the land of the red, white, and blue. You and a possible companion embark on an adventure to safety, having to deal with everything that the game will throw at you along the way. Whether that is a rogue bandit group ready to steal all your stuff, or an injured moose that may end up kicking you in the face if you get too close to it. The road to Canada isn't a pleasant one, and there's two big gameplay types you'll have to deal with here. Let's start with the more action-based one, because, well, who doesn't like a little bit of action? You'll make your way to Canada, but you'll have to face the undead along the way. You do this in a top-down action-oriented game, moving through different locations one by one. Your job here is simple. Don't die. Okay, it's not that simple, there's some complexity to it, of course, but everything circles back to your survivability. You can't get to Canada if you're dead. The most obvious threat, of course, is the undead. Zombies have a couple of stats about them, starting with their numbers, of course. Large numbers can be hard to deal with, but the bigger factor you'll have to watch out for is their current nature. Zombies can be docile, only really going after you if you're literally right on top of them. But factors will make them more aggressive, whether it's rain or the time of day. Specifically, zombies are a lot more deadly at night, so always watch your time in the corner of the screen. However, the zombies may not be the biggest threat in the game. I mean, sure, they will be the ones that kill you enough times, but it may be the fatigue that is the bigger threat in the long haul. That's because you'll need to keep your survivors fed, your car gassed up, and your bullets plentiful. You do that by exploring the different locations that you come across, and searching every room for everything that you can get your hands on. Now, these resources play a bigger part in the second part of the gameplay, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Combat-wise, you and your party have a lot of weaponry lying around to bash the brains of the undead in. There's no skills of any sort here, and there's no special attacks. All you've got is a stamina meter holding you back, which actually works rather well here. You can't swing wildly, as being left without stamina will put you in the doghouse trying to get back and avoid a zombie munching on your face. It forces you to be smart with each of your swings, or to use your group's numbers to your advantage as you make your way to the next room. The game's combat is less about killing, and more about space management. See, killing a zombie by itself really doesn't get you anything. Sure, it gives you the satisfaction of splattering a bunch of organs all over the place, but you're not rewarded with experience or any sort of loot drop. However, killing zombies will become important when attempting to look for resources and making your way through a crowd unharmed. A group of zombies can easily overwhelm you with the stamina system in place here, so attempting to take a large herd head-on is a disaster waiting to happen, especially if the zombies are irritated. You'll have to pick your spots, avoid zombies when appropriate, but realize that avoiding certain groups can come back to haunt you later on if they end up joining into a fight. Luckily, the game gives you some interesting tools as well. Of course, you get your standard weaponry, 2x4s, baseball bats, etc. But on the other hand, you got things like blowtorches that use different forms of ammo like your gasoline. In addition, there's strange weaponry like the cardboard tube. Yes, a cardboard tube. It may not be killing zombies due to its lack of strength, but it's got knockback like no other weapon in the game. And with the large amount of zombies that sieges throw at you, being able to put some space between you and them can't be overstated. And of course, you can always fight off zombies with a mop, because it's always mop time. The game does a good job of rewarding you in using this weaponry in the right situations. Knowing when to pull out a shotgun to deal with a horde is key, for example, as bullets may start to run short, and you really will need it for some of the later sieges of the game. Each character can carry up to 3 weapons at a time, and can easily switch between them, so you can end up having a wide selection of weapons for a variety of situations, assuming your weapons don't break. See, one thing that's a bit odd here is the weapon degradation. You never know exactly what the state of your weapons are, and it can cause you a bunch of headaches. Sure, a broken piece of wood is expected to only have a few uses before it breaks. But how about a hatchet? Well, I have no idea, because some weapons seem to have the durability of a Nintendo Gamecube at times. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look in the description regarding the Gamecube. The game gives you absolutely no clues, whether it be visual or with the stats on the weapon. That means that you've always got to have a backup plan. But then that spot may be needed for a different weapon for a different situation. It's a give and take game, but I do enjoy the challenge it presents because of it. Now, you'd think with the gameplay you're seeing here, it'd be perfect for a controller. And in my opinion, you'd be wrong. While you can make the controller work, something about the 360-degree movement in this game, with a control stick in particular, just made things more difficult in the end. It felt like the combat was designed to be more rigid, if that makes sense, where the game expected the movement to be controlled via the 4 cardinal direction arrow keys. I quickly abandoned my 360 controller in favor for the keyboard, although there's still some strangeness that you'll have to get used to. For example, aiming is done not via a mouse or via a control stick, but via movement. AKA, there's a reticule that auto-aims on the screen, but it does it by you looking in that direction. I see why they did this. It naturally adds to the idea that these characters aren't necessarily crack shots like you'd see on The Walking Dead. It also does add to some of the complexity of the combat. You will be able to turn around and put bullets in a zombie's chrome dome with enough skill, but only after a lot of practice and understanding of how the controls flow. You'll also have to get used to the throwing mechanism, as throwing chairs and items at enemies can help in panicked situations. But it takes a while, as it's clunky at first, and still has its quirks even when you get used to it. Also, a word of advice for anyone who plays the game: be very, very careful when throwing Molotov cocktails. A few runs ended for me when my character decided that he or she threw like a 5-year-old picking up a baseball for the first time. While most of the controls make sense here despite their quirks, I do have one complaint about the main control set here. That complaint has everything to do with the character selection. You can change which character in your group you control by going into the menu at any time. But I have to question why this wasn't a keyboard control option. There's definitely situations where you want to take control of a particular character, in particular when they do something stupid, but more on that later. You can, but having to go into the menu over and over again to do it just got annoying. Some might indicate that this may be a design decision on the part of the developers, and while it could be, I disagree with the implementation here. When you offer the ability like this, you're assuming the player is going to use it, and I think ease of use makes a huge difference in terms of that implementation. Yes, that's even if the implementation may force players to tough out certain situations that they use the feature in. It just flows a lot better, and it's not like switching doesn't have its own set of consequences in this game. Death Road to Canada's most appealing gameplay feature is the ability to keep the pressure on you. Sure, at the start of the game, you'll be a tiny bit comfortable as you try to gather as many resources as you can. but the game quickly turns on the pressure, as you'll start dealing with bigger hordes, harder decisions, and more pressure than living up to your father's expectations. You'll run through the sewers, avoiding zombies in a claustrophobic hallway and trying to find a way to escape. And then, you'll have your back against the wall, attempting to survive zombies coming from everywhere, dropping from the ceiling or crawling out of the ground. That pressure is done masterfully through the risk and reward mechanics. Searching out every part of an area to get every last resource would be great, especially when you run across some equipment that can beef up the stats of your character. And by the way, I don't mind taking a small break in the middle of a zombie apocalypse to get some gaming in to skill up my shooting. Just feels natural. But with that said, you got to always keep your eye on that clock and what's around you, as the biggest mistake you can make is getting caught in the dark or in the corner with limited options or escape paths. You'll need every last resource to make the fights later in the game manageable, as well-timed SMG or shotgun fire can open up a path to freedom rather quickly. But if you get too greedy now, you won't get the chance, as a vital character goes down because you didn't take the threats seriously enough. You'll need to find how much you can push without breaking, and that is always changing, giving you more of a challenge. I haven't really said anything too bad about the game yet, but that changes now. Despite the fact that you know generally where you need to go to get to Canada, here's a hint, keep going north, the same can't be said of your AI companions. See, they've got some interesting quirks to their pathfinding abilities. This can be seen in particular when attempting to leave an overrun room, and one of your AI partners falling behind. And that AI partner decides that the best option, even if it's not the shortest distance to you, is to walk through a herd of zombies getting themselves killed. I wouldn't have made anything of it if it were consistent, but sometimes the AI attempts to go the long way or the short way right into zombies, like they've got a death wish. Could you at least tell me if you wanted to leave the planet Earth so I don't waste putting stuff on you like a pack mule? I needed that stuff and now it's gone. It also doesn't help that the AI will ignore what you want them to do at times. Take Walker here for example. I don't want him using the pistol, I want him to use the melee weapon. I understand he's a pistolier, but guess what? I've got no ammo. But if I switch his weapon to a melee weapon, he switches it back right away. And what's weirder is that only happens with certain melee weapons. I wish I had more control here or a reason on why this happened, as it can get frustrating, especially if you're trying to save ammo and that character walks right into some. Before switching right away to the second part of gameplay, let's talk a little bit about the presentation. The game uses a pixel style that has a lot of different characters and life to it. But let's be perfectly honest here. It's not the greatest to look at visually. I mean, sure, the character customization does allow you to create some interesting characters, but it loses a lot of detail to the point where I can't even tell what some of the characters are wearing, or apparently what gender they are. I don't expect too much of indie games in this department, but with the choices made here on colors and variety of options in terms of clothing, I think it goes against the graphical style chosen. The best part of the presentation has to be the landscapes, and in particular, the use of lighting within them. You'll run across junkyards, sewers, ruined cities, and various other locations. Those locations definitely have personality, and that personality changes reasonably with darker lighting, giving it a more ominous feel. Things will feel claustrophobic, like the actual world is coming to get you. This sets the mood of the game rather well, and it's masterfully pulled off despite the pixelated style. Sound-wise, nothing really stands out here quality-wise. I mean, there's appropriate menu confirm noises and shotgun and melee attacks have appropriate sounds to them, but when I turned the sounds off, I didn't really notice them missing. With one big exception, getting grabbed by a zombie. That was a smart sound choice, as the implicit struggle with the sound forces you to pay attention to it, especially if it's a member of the crew that you're not controlling. But other than that, there's not much to talk about here. Music-wise, it's very hit and miss. The game's comedy style mixed with the serious zombie combat puts the game in a weird place. While I like some of the music, like one of the main music selections that somehow reminds me of California Games of all things, But then there's also some weird out-of-place music as well, where I'm wondering if the music was just sitting around on someone's laptop and was thrown in there for some variety. Just take a listen and make your own decision. Now to the second part of gameplay. The game is not all about smacking zombies with 2x4s, golf clubs, and shooting them in the face. The second part of the gameplay takes less influence from Canada and more influence from Oregon. The Oregon Trail to be specific, because in order to get to Canada, you'll have to deal with feral cats, madmen, and potholes via strategy choices along the way. Hey, think of it this way, at least zombies aren't as scary as catching dysentery. As you travel, the game will challenge you along the way via new locations, events, and dangers that can kill your party. Some of these will hurt your crew, some of them may help your crew, and you'll run across new characters as well, as who can say no to adding some lucha libre to your arsenal? You'll deal with these hazards in a couple of ways. First of all, each of your characters have a set of attributes. These vary from practical skills like mechanical and medical skills, to skills that you may not expect, like temperament and loyalty. All these skills will be checked in various skill checks that you'll run across. Depending on the level you complete them at, you may get more resources from smart and friendly folks, or you may have to give up some because you weren't skilled enough to outsmart the latest opponent. Sometimes you'll have to choose a particular option to go with, and each of the choices will have a particular skill associated with it. In addition, you'll get special reaction options depending on a character's special abilities or quirks. For example, a paranoid character may be the perfect person to send into a mannequin-infested warehouse, as he'll be ready if a zombie sneaks up on him, because, well, he's paranoid. Or a prepared and detailed-oriented person may always be ready for something in terms of fire safety, and have a plan to keep you safe. Now, those same character quirks can also get you in a bit of trouble too, if you choose something that doesn't really make sense. Telling someone to cool it wasn't the best way to handle that situation, Krista. And here's the thing, every choice you make depends on your current condition, and there's not always a right answer for every group. Do you jump this gap, for example? You think it'd be the most risky option in almost every case. I mean, you're not Evel Knievel. But that's not entirely true. Sometimes it is the best option. If I got a muscle car, for example, going off-road doesn't make a lot of sense. It'll get torn apart. But it should be able to make this jump easily. And that's what a good game does. Reward you for making the right decisions based on what you've got available. In addition, it also makes sure that the right decision isn't always the right decision. Take, for example, the obvious decision of splitting the candy bar. You would think that always splitting it would be the right solution, but that's not the case. This actually backfires for me, because neither of the characters get any significant amount of it, and thus, both are frustrated. This could have changed depending on the character's loyalty values, but I didn't consider it at the time, and thus, I was punished. I love the implementation here, in particular with morale. When morale is low, you actually feel its effects, as your crew will get more and more irritated, and will be more likely to do some insane things. Like turn on each other, as characters may force hard decisions from you. Wait, it's either you or the wrestler? The strongest person on my team versus the most versatile. Shit, what do I choose? And those decisions are something I love about this game. It forces you into a corner, and you have to make one in order to complete it. Now, don't get me wrong, this game has your typical roguelike elements to it, and what I mean by that is, be prepared for the RNG to royally screw you over at times. I don't know how many times I ended up cursing after my backpack ended up ripping open again, as my character apparently has the awareness of a slowpoke, and makes me lose significant resources that I need in order to keep my people happy. Or even with some skill checks, having a character die to something silly like a bee sting or falling out of a tree. That can get frustrating. With that said, it never overtakes the feeling that you're in control of your own decisions. If you make the right decisions based on what you know, you may limp to the next area. But hey, at least you're not dead. And the writing here keeps you interested, especially if you happen to run across an inspired media character like Octodad. Because the last thing I expected was an appearance from Octodad. And yet it somehow works for this game and its storyline. It's weird, but rather effective. I've said a ton of good stuff about Death Row to Canada at this point, and some critical stuff as well. But I need to mention one last thing. The biggest thing that held me back in this game was its ability to crash on me. Now I want to make this clear. There's a reasonable portion of the player base that's not experiencing the crashing that I did. There are several, however, and the developer is working with those affected to narrow down the issue right now. There seems to be the common trend of it being Windows 10 users, and the developer has been doing his best to track down the issue, providing beta builds to get more information for him to find the bug. Now, he is responsive, so I like the fact that it's probably going to be fixed within the week, but I have to give you guys that information because, well, it did cause some struggles for me from time to time. Not only did I enjoy my time with Death Row to Canada, I could see myself enjoying it for return trips to the country of maple syrup, hockey, and some other offensive stereotype that I can think of. That would be the case if I didn't have 200 other games to review, of course, but hey, I got a job. It's got a great formula for a roguelike, simple gameplay with hidden layers all over the place, a quirky yet fun story with jokes and references, and gameplay that rewards smart decision making. Fans of the genre would do themselves a disservice for not picking up this game, as it's got the replayability with the different modes available, and you'll want to search out those various hidden characters and items within the game. That's it for my review, but as always, I recommend you look at other reviews as well. Even though I try to keep as objective as possible, it's always possible that I miss something, and the best way for a consumer to figure out if a game is for him is to find multiple sources of opinions on the game. For something like that, I'd suggest something like OpenCritic. Anyway, this is Dragnix signing out, with the next game I will cover being This Is the Police. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe if you want more content like this. In the description below, you'll find the Steam review accompanying this vid, along with social media that you can follow me on, Twitter, Google+, and Facebook groups. And if you want to support the channel, click that Patreon on the left of the screen. And remember, keep on gaming.